A frozen forest, a lonely lumberjack, three mysterious women discovered half buried in the snow. He thought he was saving their lives, but what they carried was darker than the storm itself. A secret that could destroy him or bind them forever. Nothing in that cabin was as it seemed. The snow was falling harder than it had in weeks, a quiet storm blanketing the forest in silence. Elias, a lumberjack who had lived alone in the northern wilderness since his wife's passing, pulled his fur-lined coat tighter around his shoulders. For months he had chosen solitude, the sound of his axe against the pines, his only companion. The cabin he built with his own hands was the last refuge before the mountains stretched into wild emptiness. But that morning, something different carried on the wind. A sound, not belonging to any animal he knew. Soft, almost broken, like a cry, swallowed by the snow. He paused, axe still raised, breath steaming in the frozen air. At first he thought it was the groan of shifting ice or the wind sneaking through the trees. Yet, when it came again, faint but desperate, he dropped the axe into the snow and followed. The deeper he walked, the heavier the silence became, until suddenly the forest opened to a small clearing. And there, against the harsh white, he saw them three figures huddled together, barely moving. Women, their skin pale with cold, their garments stitched from hides and beads, unlike anything Elias had seen in years. Their long black hair was tangled with frost, and their lips trembled with each shallow breath. For a moment he froze, unsure whether this was real or some cruel trick of his loneliness. But then one of them raised her eyes to his dark, burning with a strength that refused to die even as her body failed. Without thinking, Elias rushed forward. He lifted the first woman into his arms, feeling the terrifying lightness of her frame. As if the snow itself weighed more than she did, the others clung to his coat, and he guided them toward his cabin, each step sinking into the drifts until his lungs ached. Inside, the warmth of the fire wrapped around them, but the women did not speak. They sat close together, their silence deeper than exhaustion. Elias fetched blankets, hot broth, anything to break the frostbite threatening their hands and feet. He tried asking who they were, what had happened, but only their eyes answered, haunted, guarded, as if the truth was something too heavy to give away. As night came, the storm thickened, trapping them inside. Elias couldn't help but notice the way they moved, always aware of each other, as if bound by something unseen. Their clothes were torn in places, as though they had run through brambles or worse. When he left the room for firewood, he heard whispers low, hurried, spoken in a tongue he could not understand. And each time he returned, the whispers stopped, replaced by silence too sharp to ignore. That night, as the flames flickered against the log walls, Elias lay awake. His instincts told him these women carried something more than frostbite and hunger. Something was hidden beneath their silence. Yet when one of them stirred in her sleep, a soft whimper escaping her throat, he found himself rising quietly to adjust her blanket, a protective urge anchoring itself deep in his chest. But the question burned brighter than the fire. Who were they? And what secret had followed them out of the snow? The storm raged through the night, its howling wind pressing against the cabin walls like an angry spirit. Elias rose before dawn, his old habit as a lumberjack refusing to leave him. He stirred the fire back to life, the embers glowing red as he placed another log. Behind him, the women still slept, huddled together under heavy blankets. Their faces, though worn by cold and hunger, held a quiet beauty that made him pause. But what unsettled him most was not their appearance. It was the mystery wrapped around them like a second skin. When the first woman stirred awake, she did not thank him, nor did she look surprised to find herself alive. She studied him with sharp eyes, as if weighing his soul before allowing a single word. Her voice, when it came, was soft but steady. "Why did you bring us here?" The question caught him off guard. "You'd have frozen out there," Elias replied, his voice rough with sleep. "Anyone would have done the same." Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer before she turned to the others. They whispered together in their tongue, words flowing quickly like water over stone. Elias strained to understand, but their language was foreign. Still, the way they spoke, low, urgent, careful, stirred unease in his gut. By midday, the storm eased enough for Elias to fetch more wood. The women followed him with their eyes, as if afraid he might not return. When he came back inside, he noticed something strange. The smallest of the three had drawn markings into the frost on the window. Symbols, circles and lines, interwoven like a map, or perhaps something older, something ritualistic. When she saw him notice, she brushed the frost away with her sleeve, too quickly. That night, as the women warmed themselves, Elias offered food bread he had baked days before, dried meat from his hunt. They accepted but ate cautiously, never letting their hands stray far from one another. He could not help but ask, "Where did you come from?" "The nearest settlement's 3 days south. Nobody should have been out in this storm." The eldest of the three, who seemed to be their unspoken leader, finally met his gaze. "We were running," she said simply. "From what?" Her silence stretched long enough that Elias thought she would not answer. But then she spoke again, voice lower this time. "From men who wanted us as their property." Elias felt the air grow heavier. Memories flickered of his wife, taken from him by illness years ago, and the grief that had hollowed him since. He clenched his jaw. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "No one comes to this forest without reason." For the first time, he saw the faintest shift in their eyes' relief mingled with something else. But even as warmth crept into the cabin, Elias sensed they still carried a shadow no fire could burn away. Later, when he stepped outside to check the traps near the tree line, the silence of the woods felt different. He saw footprints faint, half covered by snow leading toward the ridge, too large to belong to the women, too fresh to be old. He followed them only a short distance before turning back, a chill settling over him. Someone had been near. When he returned, the women sat straighter, eyes darting to the door as though they expected someone else to walk in behind him. He tried to mask his unease, but they saw it. The eldest spoke again, her words measured. "They've found us." Elias stiffened. "Who?" But no answer came. Only silence and the crackle of fire. That night, sleep refused him. He lay on his bed of furs, staring at the ceiling beams. He could hear the women whispering again, their language fast and tense. At one point, one of them wept softly, muffled by the other's arms. Elias closed his eyes, but the sound carved into him. Whoever these women were, whatever secret they carried, it was not finished with them. As dawn approached, Elias thought he heard something outside the crunch of boots in snow. He sat up, hand instinctively reaching for the axe propped by the door. The cabin was quiet except for the women's slow breathing. For a moment, he told himself it was just the wind. But deep down, he knew better. Someone was out there, watching, and the secret the women refused to speak was about to break open. The morning came pale and gray, the snow outside reflecting a light so sharp it hurt Elias's eyes when he opened the door. He scanned the tree line, searching for proof of what he had heard in the night. At first, there was nothing, just silence and the endless forest. But then, half buried by the storm, he spotted them. More footprints, circling, closing in on the cabin. Whoever had left them had been watching from the shadows, waiting. Inside, the women were awake, already gathered as if they knew what he had seen. The eldest stood when Elias entered, her expression unreadable. "They are close," she said, not as a warning, but as a certainty. Elias set his axe against the wall, his heart pounding. "You need to tell me the truth. Who are you running from? Why are they after you?" For a moment, no one spoke. Then the smallest of the three, her eyes wide with fear, but her voice steady, answered. "They call themselves hunters, not of animals, of us." Elias frowned. "Hunters? They came to our village," the eldest explained, her voice like stone, "took women as if they were prizes, burned homes that resisted. We escaped, but not all did. They want us back, not for who we are, but for what they think we carry." Elias felt the weight of her words sink deep into him. Property. Prizes. He gripped the handle of his axe until his knuckles whitened. The rage in his chest surprised him. It had been years since he had allowed himself to feel anything but grief. Yet now, looking at these women, something sharp and unyielding woke inside him. That night, the cabin became a fortress. Elias blocked the door with heavy logs, checked his traps for weapons, and stacked firewood like barricades. The women sat near the fire, their faces lit with flickering light. They still whispered in their own tongue, but when Elias caught their eyes, he saw trust beginning to flicker there, fragile but real. The attack came just before dawn. A shout shattered the silence, followed by the crunch of boots charging through snow. Elias's body moved before his mind as he seized his axe, flung open the door, and met the first figure head on. A man in a tattered coat, rifle slung across his back, eyes burning with the hunger of a predator. Elias swung, the blade catching the wood of the man's rifle and sending him sprawling. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore into the cabin walls, splinters flying. The women screamed, ducking low. Elias roared, slamming the door shut, heart racing as the sound of men circled the cabin. He knew there were too many more than he could face alone. Then, something unexpected happened. The eldest woman rose, her eyes fierce. From beneath her garments, she drew a small pouch, scattering its contents into the fire. The flames hissed and surged, filling the cabin with thick, choking smoke. Symbols flared in the air, shapes Elias had seen her draw before in the frost. The hunters outside coughed, cursed, their shouts turning panicked. Elias stared in shock, but the women did not look afraid. Instead, they chanted low and fast, their voices weaving together like threads of a single cloth. The smoke poured from the chimney and cracks in the logs, curling out into the storm. When Elias finally stumbled outside, axe in hand, the hunters were retreating. Some stumbled blindly into the trees, their rifles forgotten in the snow. Others fled with wild eyes, as if chased by something unseen. The forest swallowed them, leaving only silence and the fading echo of their boots. Breathless, Elias turned back to the cabin. The women stood in the doorway, their faces pale but unbroken. For the first time, the eldest smiled just faintly, but enough to soften the lines of her face. "You saved us," she said. Elias shook his head, chest heaving. "No, you saved yourselves." The snow fell gently now, the storm broken. For the next days, the forest grew quiet again. Elias repaired the cabin walls, and the women helped, their hands skilled in ways he hadn't expected. They cooked meals from what little they had, tended the fire, even laughed softly among themselves. And though they never spoke of what they had done with the smoke and fire, Elias no longer needed to know. Their secret was theirs to keep. When the time came for them to leave, the forest seemed unwilling to let them go. The women packed what they could carry, wrapping themselves against the cold. Elias stood by the door, unsure what to say. The smallest approached first, pressing a beaded bracelet into his hand. The beads were dark and simple, but he understood it was a token of thanks and a reminder. The eldest spoke last. "You gave us more than shelter," she said. "You gave us hope again. That is something men like them can never take." Elias felt the ache in his chest, the emptiness that had lived there since his wife's death. For the first time, it wasn't just grief. It was something else, something alive. As they walked away into the snow, their figures growing smaller between the trees, Elias stood watching until the forest swallowed them whole. He knew he might never see them again, yet their presence lingered, like fire still burning in the ashes. And though the wilderness remained as cold and unforgiving as ever, Elias no longer felt alone, because in the silence of the snow, he carried their secret with him.